ships running aground, sinking, and lives being lost, all caused by tiny mistakes that went unnoticed until the disaster was inevitable. I want to start the series with what I call the deadly curse of negligence. Operating a merchant ship requires combined efforts of the entire crew and various complex and often connected to each other systems to move these thousands of tons of steel across the world's oceans. These elements are as fragile as a line of dominoes, and even a tiny mistake can cause all of them to collapse, often with fatal consequences to the crew and passengers. Now that I've set the mood, let's jump back to 1967 to the Seven Stones Reef off the coast of the United Kingdom. At 6:30 am, the Torrey Canyon tanker passed the Scilly Isles. The captain was racing against the clock to reach the port of Milford Haven by high tide. Why the rush, you may ask? For a ship of this size, tides aren't just about water levels. You see, Torrey Canyon was reaching 17 meters below the water surface, so it had to go inside the port during the high tide in order to even fit. If they missed the high tide, they would have to wait several hours before entering the port, and of course, it generates costs. By 8:30 am, to ensure that they make the time window, the captain already decided to take a shortcut through a narrow channel near the reef. He kept the ship on autopilot to maintain steady course as he was managing navigation. 10 minutes later, he realized that the tide had pushed the ship off the desired course, and that is when the dominoes began to fall. The captain immediately told the helmsman to steer to port, forgetting that the ship was still on autopilot. As the helmsman turned the wheel, the ship didn't react. She continued straight toward the rocks. Eventually the captain shouted, "Hard to port," but still no reaction. As the bridge team panicked, assuming a steering malfunction, the distance to the rocks closed rapidly. Finally, the captain checked the autopilot switch and realized that the manual helm was never in fact engaged. Just 30 seconds later, the Torrey Canyon struck the reef, resulting in the most significant oil spill in the history of maritime law. The disaster revealed how outdated the maritime law regarding fighting pollution was at the time, but that's a topic for a completely different video. My point is that the accident could have been completely prevented if the correct handover procedures were in place. Normally, on modern ships, it's crucial that the captain first presses a button on his console to switch from autopilot to manual steering, and then the helmsman presses another button at the helm to confirm that he has taken over the steering. While Torrey Canyon had a construction flaw that didn't force this kind of behavior, it is always the captain's duty to make sure that the steering mode was changed before issuing any commands to the helmsman. The story of the Royal Majesty begins on the 9th of June 1995. Late at night, a loose cable disconnects from the GPS antenna. When the antenna disconnected, this GPS receiver switched from regular operation to dead reckoning mode. This means that the receiver was estimating the ship's position based on last known position, course and speed. The information about dead reckoning mode is displayed on the screen, but there is no alarm. 24 hours later, the ship is already 17 miles off the desired course. The electronic chart system pulls the information about the position directly from the GPS, so to the officers on the bridge, everything seems normal. At 10:20 p.m., the lookout notices that the buoy marking Nantucket Shoals is on the port side of the ship. The officer ignored the report as the description matched the BA buoy along the planned route, while in fact he was observing the AR buoy. 2 hours later, the Royal Majesty goes aground on the Rose and Crown Shoal. The loss was at $7 million and fortunately no lives were lost. But the accident was completely avoidable. In the 24-hour period, each officer had to put the position of the ship in the logbook, and they did so from the GPS receiver. And no one, including the captain, noticed that the GPS receiver was in the dead reckoning mode. The investigation report also shows that the cable to the GPS antenna was not properly secured, meaning that by accidentally kicking or tripping on the cable, the crew members may have caused it to disconnect in the first place. This accident shows exactly why understanding of the navigation instruments is so important. It's important not only to know how to use the device, but also to know its limitations and ways it can potentially trick us. On the 22nd of March 2006, a modern ferry equipped with modern navigation instruments enters the right zone. The standing orders dictate a course change after passing the Sainty Point. That night, the officer on watch is not alone on the bridge. The quartermaster joined him in a personal conversation. 7 past midnight, the Queen of the North passes the Sainty Point and continues straight. For 14 minutes, she sails into danger, but the officer doesn't pay attention to his radar or the electronic chart. Normally, the cross-track error alarm would sound in such situation, but the crew disabled it permanently just because they found the noise to be too annoying. Suddenly, the officer sees the trees on the Jail Island and realizes that they are way too close to the land. He immediately turns off the autopilot and orders a hard turn on the helm. Unfortunately, the physics is unforgiving. The Queen of the North slumps into the rocks and nearly 80 minutes later she slips beneath the surface. That night, 2 lives were lost, and the accident was absolutely avoidable. During training, officers are taught about different systems on the ships, different navigational instruments, and the alarms they can give. They also learn how to fine-tune the alarms or how to disable them, because in some situations they would cause more problems than they would help. The problem here is that the crew, instead of fine-tuning the alarm to make it less annoying, decided to completely turn it off. Out of all possible scenarios, this is definitely the worst one. If the alarm was in place, the officer on the bridge would realize that he is off the desired course way sooner. If he just had this extra couple minutes, he would make the turn and save the ship from sinking and also these 2 passengers from dying. All the disasters I covered today come down to one simple thing. The crew neglected their responsibilities. They didn't fully understand the equipment they were using, even though they were trained to operate it. Also, in critical moments, they disregarded their duties and thought what could ever go wrong. Little did they know, it was the first domino to fall. If what I showed you today is interesting, stay with me for the future episodes of How Ships Work, because I will go in depth with different systems used on ships and show you the perfect harmony behind these beautiful machines.